Welcome to the All Pro Football Data Show. My name is Jim Coburn. In today's episode, we're talking about the top five worst picks in the first round of the 2024 NFL Draft Class. Stay tuned to the end of the video where we get into who the worst draft pick was based on data. But before we get into that, and before the haters get to the comments, I'm going to explain to you how I did today's video. So I do draft data work. If you want to know more about the stuff that I do, if you go to my top 50 prospects video, it can kind of go into the correlations and all the other stuff that I do in terms of the data, the framework, the foundation of what I do. But I'm going to do a quick and dirty in terms of how we're going to be draft or evaluating these prospects. So first off, draft approximate value score, DAV. This score takes a look at the average or the mean of a prospect's draft selection. So if they were picked at pick 16, for example, what was the average approximate value of all the players taken at pick 16? That's what the draft approximate value score does. It takes a look and sees if you just randomly selected a player at pick 16, what would you most likely get in terms of a player at that pick? So that's essentially what that is. And it's a good grading system because you're going to have prospects that, and of course, you're going to need time with it, of course, because this is how you really should be grading draft classes, 4 years from now. You can kind of see, okay, most players taken at this spot had this score. They had a player who was better than that. And a lot of times their data scores, which is how they test it as a prospect coming out, which is the second part to this, which is the expected approximate value score. This data can kind of give you an idea of who they are as a prospect coming out and what the correlations are as well. So draft expected approximate value, or the data score, takes a look at production, takes a look at athleticism, takes a look at physical metrics, takes a look at the team that they played on, strength of team, strength of schedule, the type of schedule that they faced. It takes a look at their age. All those factors are put into one number to give a data grade. And typically, the players who tested higher or above average in terms of their data grade go on to become long-term starters at the NFL level. So that's why it matters. If you want to know why it matters even more, again, like I stated before, check out my video on the top 50 prospects in this draft class. I go over all the correlations on there so you guys have a general foundation in terms of this. And of course, average draft value per draft range. This is up here because it can kind of show you a quick and dirty look at what is expected out of a prospect. So typically, when you take a player between picks 1 through 5, you're going to get a player with a 98.84 out of 100 approximate value score. That's like a all-pro, Pro Bowl prospect. Simple as that. Then, of course, you get into picks 6 to 10. You get a little bit of a drop-off there. Picks 11 to 15 are in the same range. So typically, picks 6 through 10 are as valuable as picks 11 through 15. Who would have thunk it? Then, of course, you have picks 16 to 20, which is where you have a little bit of a drop off. 26 to 30, there's a little bit of a drop off. And then 31 to 35, you have a little bit of a bump in terms of the data there. But it's a general slope. It's a general slope. So the lower you go, the less value you're more likely going to receive, is essentially what it's showing you. With all that stuff out of the way, let's get to another factor, which is limiting factor. So what can affect the grades based on data and based on approximate value? Well, one thing can affect it is the coaching of a team. The coaching of a team. Because if you have poor coaching and you don't really develop your prospects, they're not going to make it. They're really not going to make it. There's countless prospects. Like, take Alex Smith, for example. He goes to the San Francisco 49ers and doesn't really develop and struggles and just meanders around for a while. And he finally gets a head coach who finally develops him, finally gets him the coaching that he needs, and then he becomes a serviceable starter. Look at Geno Smith. Same difference. Was on the Jets. Terrible environment, terrible situation. Kept sticking in the league, and he finally was able to start and actually perform really well. So coaching can affect the development or lack of development of prospects. Another thing, unforeseen injuries can lead to inconsistent outcomes. I don't need to tell you guys that if a player has a season-ending injury, he might have been a Hall of Famer, but he's not playing anymore. So that can affect things. The publicity of the media market can influence the perception of a prospect, leading to inflated grades. This is kind of like PFF. Just the general mainstream media can pick favorites, and that can inflate players as well. Psychological and mental makeup deals with mental health. If a prospect has an addictive personality, that's something that can definitely affect them in very painful ways. And then, of course, you have substitution bias, which is the possibility that coaches switch from higher costing prospects to lower cost but lower quality. So you constantly are going to see teams that draft players to replace other players. They may not be as good as that player, but they're cheaper, so they're going to go with the cheaper option. You're constantly going to see examples of that, when free agency comes around. So it's just part of part of the game when it comes to salary caps, and that definitely can affect numbers because you might have a prospect that wouldn't normally be starting, but because of the cap situation and because of not really having many other options and not wanting to have a guy there and be paid a decent amount of money, you're going to end up with a player that's inferior or lesser quality in terms of that. So with all that stuff out of the way, let's get to number 5 on this list. So the fifth worst draft prospect in the 2024 NFL draft class was Chop Robinson from Penn State. I've talked about him in previous videos. You can check those videos out as well if you just look up Chop Robinson, Jim Coburn, All Pro Football Data. But the data comparison for him that I was able to kind of pull was Trayvon Walker. Trayvon Walker. Now, when you look at it, it's like this. Solo tackle market share, which is MS, was very similar between Chop Robinson and Trayvon Walker. 31 percentile for Walker, 38 percentile for Robinson. Sack market share, 32 for Trayvon Walker, 34 percentile for Chop Robinson. TFL market share was better for Chop Robinson with 39 percentile and then 30 percentile for Trayvon Walker. Explosiveness, Walker was much more athletic compared to Chop Robinson, but they do have similar speed and similar flexibility. And then their pass score, which is their adjusted production score, which takes a look at their age, level of competition, and the team that they played on. That also is there. And Robinson had a lesser score there, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that Robinson played at Penn State, Walker played at Georgia. Georgia was a much more impressive team from a strength standpoint compared to Penn State. But overall, that's kind of what you're looking at. The data grade for Chop Robinson was 75.39 out of 100. So that's essentially his ceiling as a prospect. His projected AV is 73.99 out of 100. So based on prospects that tested similar to him in his range as a first rounder, most of them tested with a 73.99 AV in their career. So we're talking about mostly rotational pass rushers. D Ford was a good example of a prospect that was very similar to Chop Robinson in the data. So a rotational pass rusher, but not somebody that will go on to become a long-term impactful starter or all-pro Pro Bowl player. But he does have great athleticism, so there could be that upside there. And then the average AV of the pick selected for Chop Robinson was 90.73. There's a big difference between getting a player who should be a 90 percentile prospect and then ending up with a 75 percentile prospect. That's why he's number 5 on this list. Then we get to number 4 on this list, which is at pick 31 with Ricky Purcel, wide receiver from Florida. I know I'm going to get a flag from this because there are big fans, big fans of Ricky Purcell. And it's not like I haven't seen the highlights in the film. He is impressive, but his data is a little scary, guys. When you look at his overall data as a prospect, these are the wide receivers that tested with Purcell as a prospect in the first round with similar data grades and other sort of things like that. And it's a lot of some starters here. Calvin Ridley, that might be a good comp for him. Alvin Harper, Willie Galt is another player that is similar to him. Anthony Miller is like a higher end kind of guy. Haywood Jeffries is another kind of higher end type of guy. Anthony Gonzalez might be the best comparison just because of athleticism traits. Very similar athleticism for these prospects there. But again, most of these players are just kind of okay. Starters, obviously, but look at the age scores. Purcell is really old, a very old prospect. His data grade was 67.06 out of 100. What held him down the most was his age. His projected AV, which is what the average AV of all these prospects I have up right here, was 68.75 out of 100. And then the average AV of the pick that he was selected at is 88.80 out of 100. So you're expected to get an 88 percentile prospect. You ended up with a player who's more likely, based on the numbers, to be a 68 percentile prospect. That's why he's number 4 on this list. Then, of course, we get to number 3 on this list, which is the first quarterback. There's 2 of them on this list. Number 3 is Bo Nix, quarterback out of Oregon. These are all the prospects that tested in the first round with a similar PEAV score or pocket AV score, approximate value score. The data grade for Nix was 70.64 out of 100. His projected AV was 77.70 out of 100, and his average AV of the pick selected was 96.53 out of 100. So most prospects taken at where he was taken are 96 percentile prospects. And Bo Nix is a 77 percentile prospect. When it's all said and done, that's most likely based on the prospects that were taken in the similar area, based on his age and based on his other factors. So upside wise, you might have a Ryan Tannehill, Chad Pennington type of situation. I mean, those guys played in the NFL and became starters. Worst case scenario, you get a Brandon Weeden, a Joey Harrington, a Achilles Smith, a Kenny Pickett, or a Jim Drunken Miller. So, not the best selection here, but hey, the Broncos painted themselves into a corner. They needed a quarterback, so they took one that is a long shot to be a very successful player. Then we get to number 2 on this list, which is another player I think I might get some flack on, but whatever. The data is what it is. Jared Verse, edge from Florida State. His data grade was 64.09 out of 100 with a projected AV of 66.56 based on all the prospects that he tested most similar to as a first rounder. And then his average AV of the pick selected was 92.66 out of 100. So you are usually expected to get a 92 percentile prospect where the Rams were selecting, and they ended up with a prospect that's closer to a 60 percentile prospect. That is not a good selection. Now, does this mean that Jared Verse is going to be a bust? I don't believe so. I think when you look at players that are similar to him, Cameron Wembley, Derek Alexander is on here, Vonnie Holiday, Robert Ayers. These are the prospects that I think you would kind of expect to be there for him in terms of his overall data. So that's definitely impressive for him based on that. Then, of course, we have the number 1 or worst draft pick in the 2024 NFL first round, and it's Michael Penix Jr., quarterback out of Washington. Now, I understand there might be some hate, there might be some flack for this, but I think nobody can disagree with this because this is the worst pick for many different reasons. One, from a data perspective, the average AV of most picks taken at pick 8 is 96.91 out of 100, okay? So you're talking about Pro Bowl, fringe Pro Bowl to starter prospects is what you're most likely going to get with the 8th selection. And the data grade for Michael Penix Jr. is 60.27 out of 100, and his projected AV is 77.73 out of 100. So all the quarterbacks that you see right here who tested most similar to Michael Penix Jr., Achilles Smith, Joey Harrington, Brandon Weeden, Ryan Tannehill, Kenny Pickett, Chad Pennington, Jim Drunken Miller, the average AV of those guys was 77.73 out of 100. So that's kind of like the upside potential, like a decent overall realistic upside to him would be 77.73 out of 100, which is a backup. But here's the kicker. The average AV of a pick selected here is 96.91 out of 100. That's what the value is. Michael Penix Jr. is not going to have any value because he's already going to be drafted to be a backup to Kirk Cousins. Are you getting that right? So he brings zero value year one, zero value year two, unless Kirk Cousins retires or quits football or gets traded. And even then, the upside. So again, this is the upside. The upside with a guy like Michael Penix Jr. realistically would be Chad Pennington. Let me repeat. Let me make sure this is on. Okay. The upside for this selection for Michael Penix Jr. The prospects that tested most similar to him based on his overall collected data, his college efficiency, his age, his other athletic, testing, everything like that. His upside is somewhere between Ryan Tannehill and Chad Pennington. Come on. Now, I'm not faulting the selection of a quarterback because based on my data work, the Falcons did have a need at quarterback. One reason why Kirk Cousins is 36 years old. Most quarterbacks who hit 36 start to decline in terms of their play. Even Tom Brady started to decline once he started to hit his late 30s, and then he had a little bit of a resurgence. But his balls, he was throwing ducks, guys. Later in his career, Tom Brady's career, he was throwing ducks. He really was. He was not the same Tom Brady because he was older. He's old. He's an older man. He's an older man, guys. So even a Hall of Famer like Tom Brady is going to degrade. He's going to fall victim to Father Time. So when you look at all this stuff with Michael Penix, it just doesn't make sense for multiple levels. One is the player they selected. If they had taken, say, J.J. McCarthy, J.J. McCarthy is a younger prospect. He has better data profile compared to Michael Penix Jr., and he makes sense because a lot of people want him to stay on the bench a little bit and then start. They don't want him to start him right away because they're afraid that he's not developed enough because he didn't get a whole lot of snaps at Michigan, or as many compared to other prospects. So it makes more sense to take a guy like J.J. McCarthy because he has better upside, better data grade, and could legitimately become a 96 percentile quarterback. Penix Jr., there's never been a quarterback in his range to be a 96 percentile or 97 percentile quarterback. So right then and there, you're going to wait 3 years and have a backup quarterback. Because that's what he tested as, a backup quarterback. That's what he's going to be, a backup quarterback. And a backup quarterback has no value until something happens. So that's that's the pick. That's the issue. So Michael Penix Jr., worst pick in the 2024 NFL draft class, first round of the draft class. I don't really have much else to say. I don't want to go on and on about it because the data is just so clearly there with him. Now, am I saying that he's going to be a bust? Not necessarily. He has potential to be a starter, but again, you're looking at a Chad Pennington, Ryan Tannehill like starter. Is that a player that you take 8th overall in a class filled with Hall of Fame offensive linemen based on data, filled with wide receivers that are unbelievably talented, filled with edge rushers and defensive tackles? Like, you had your pick of the litter. Like, this is one of the best draft classes based on data in a long time. And you decide to kind of punt the pick to take a quarterback who wasn't even the right quarterback to take in terms of a long-term option. Because by the time Kirk Cousins, let's say everything goes right for Kirk Cousins, and he's there and he retires at the age of 40, Michael Penix will be a 28-year-old rookie. There's going to be other quarterbacks drafted in that time that could replace him. So I'm not going to say much else about it. I'm not going to say much else about it. But this was not the best selection. It just wasn't. Overall, thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Jim Coburn. You can check out my other work at patreon.com/jcoburn. Consider becoming a subscriber there. It's only $3 a month, guys. It's well worth it. You get lots of data stuff there and lots of things that you don't even really get to see on the YouTube channel. It also helps support the channel as well. Also, check out my formerly known as Twitter account at Gemetrics. Buy the 2024 NFL Draft Analytics Guide available today. Link is in the description. Learn more about these prospects from a data perspective and really get ahead of everybody in terms of that. And also like, comment, and subscribe of who you think is the worst prospect in the 2024 NFL Draft in the first round. And I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Peace.